So, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Hack Share. In this episode, I know for a fact that you're going to be inspired because I'm speaking to someone who is an endurance adventure athlete who has covered over 26,000 kilometers of human powered traveling, and it's just through 27 countries over the last 5 years. He is also a TEDx speaker and an author, and in 2016, he was awarded Scottish Adventurer of the Year. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode, and thank you to my guests for being on the show. My guest today is Jamie Ramsay. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And it's great hearing all those stats back because it's in such a short amount of time that I've managed to fit so much in. So really looking forward to talking about some of those adventures today.
Thank you. No, I'm very I'm very interested to find out more about it because it's just, some of the stuff that you've done is just incredible, and I just don't know how you do it. So hats off to you. And I just wanted to get into it really because your adventure career started in 2014. Actually, didn't you quit your job? You made your way up to partner in a leading PR firm, and then you just quit it to do something that you've always wanted to do and become an adventurer and travel the world. Is that how it all started for you?
It is sort of how it started. So I think, like many people who venture into the city, I kind of took the usual path: school, university, got myself a job in London, and but the longer I spent in London, the more I realised how little thought I put into actually what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be in life. So everything like what I chose to do at university, even the career that I went into, it was more out of the feeling that I had to do that and that's what was expected of me rather than what I actually wanted to do. So I ended up in a career doing financial communications in a company it's a very good company. It was just something that I wasn't passionate about it. And over the 12 years that I was there, I progressed up. The salary crept up each year, and you got more entrenched into the kind of clenches of city life. And it was in 2013 I was made partner. And at that point, I took most people looked at me and thought, "Wow, you're successful. You've made it. You're now a partner. You've got everything." And it was at that time I took a bit of a pause to just kind of take stock of where I actually was. And when I looked at my own life, I realized that actually, while on paper it all looked rosy, I was not in a particularly positive place myself. I was dissatisfied, unfulfilled, not happy. And it was causing me to get into like doing endurance sports and gym in an excessive way, and then drinking way too much on the flip side of that. And I kind of felt myself going into a spiral. And if anyone wants to hear more, there's a YouTube TEDx talk where I go into it more in detail. But I woke up one morning at work, sleeping after a night out, sleeping on the loo in the shower room, and because I thought that was a good idea the night before. And it was at that point I just decided, this is not where my life is meant to be going at the age of 34. Luckily I managed to notice that, and then I kind of spent time diving down into that and trying to figure out what it is that I really wanted to do.
Right. Okay. So how did you find your path? Because working your way up to being a partner at this firm is just amazing. That's something that we as working professionals want to do, but you changed it like completely. How did you find your path?
So as I noticed this spiraling that was going on in my life, kind of going very much in the wrong direction, I sat at my desk and I looked around and I saw the people who didn't see their wives, who didn't see their kids, who were drinking too much, who were unhealthy. And it was those people I didn't want to be. And I sat and I thought, right, when was the last moment I can remember feeling happy, fulfilled, content, all the things that you want in life when you take away money and titles and what kind of car you have. And I entered into a race in Vietnam in 2013. It was 240 kilometers through the Vietnamese jungle. And it got cancelled a month before the race was meant to take place. And I remember feeling very disappointed and kind of let down. And I told everyone I was going to do it. And something in me just said, no, this is not how this ends. And I used that flight. I went to Vietnam. I put my backpack on and just by myself ran 240 kilometers down the road, finding places to stay every night, because that's what I said to people I would do. And when I was at the end of that sitting, I remember just this amazing feeling of kind of self-worth, like I'd achieved something. So when I was in this moment of spiraling, I thought back to that moment and I was like, that's what I want back in my life. And I said, if it's going to be running, it's going to be adventure, it's going to be culture, it's going to be exploring. These are the passions to me. So I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to put those things front and center. And if I'm doing something like that, then it has to be at least a year. Can't quit my career to go and do a marathon somewhere. I did 30 kilometers a day average over a year, 11,000 kilometers, and then went to Google and started looking for routes to take.
Oh my gosh. This story, it's crazy. I was watching your YouTube video on this this morning where you flew to Canada and then you embarked on your 17,000 kilometers to Argentina. Was that the next step for you?
Yeah, that was it. I looked at running around the world. I looked at running down through Africa. And at that point, I'd never done anything like that before. So it seemed too daunting and too much kind of administration to actually be able to get the visas and everything. When I looked over to the Americas, I saw Canada to Buenos Aires, 17,000 kilometers, only 2 languages. My British passport would take me into every country without the need for a visa. So it kind of very much was the easy option. So I handed my notice in April. I finished my job on the 28th of July. And on the 14th or 15th of August, 2014, I was standing in Vancouver with 17,000 kilometers of road in front of me. And I kind of a hope and desire that this was going to be the changing point in my life.
Wow. How did you prepare for that? Because I find it very, very fascinating that you took a baby stroller with you and just put your belongings in that. How do you know where to go as well? Like, how do you know that you're going to take the right route? Because me personally, I'll get lost if I want to go to, the other side of London. Like I'll plan about 20 minutes to figure out how to go like an hour. How do you plan to go through, all these different countries and stay on top of it and stay focused?
So it's really difficult. So at the beginning, you have to look at the route you're intending to do, and you have to be comfortable with the fact that that's what you're setting out to do. Then you're trying to get people on board, so companies to help provide you with kits or anything like that. So then you have to build it all up, and then you have to start telling everyone it's this long, and it's like, I've got to run across the Atacama Desert. I've got to run over the Andes. I've got to get my way around the Darien Gap. There's going to be this. And then you freak yourself out. And then you're like, oh, God, how am I going to do this? So then you have to reprogram your brain to think, okay, anything sounds scary if you say the numbers up front. But if you break it down in just to the little elements that combined will turn into that, then it becomes a lot less scary. So I set up very clear success points to make it more, to kind of to make sure that I wasn't going to see myself as failing. So quitting my job was a success point. It showed that I had the courage to follow through with my conviction. Getting to the starting point in Vancouver was a second success point. It showed that I had the ability to research the route, to find the right kit, to get everything in place to be able to actually undertake the adventure. Stage 3 was getting to the end of USA. If I'd run to the end of USA, I could come home with my head held high that I've done a 2,900 kilometer run. And then I had Panama, then Buenos Aires. It was all about putting these little positions in place so I never felt like I was going to be failing. And then you just, as a cliche, but you just break down the whole adventure into I basically never planned more than a couple of days ahead. I just needed to know where water and food were. And I learned very quickly that if you say to yourself, I'm going to run 30 kilometers a day, then that's all you will do. You will run 30 kilometers a day, and you are either going to be limiting yourself to 30 or you're going to be overstretching yourself to get to 30, both of which are negative. So by taking away any kind of structure, I just said, you just have to run every day. You can, if you need to take a rest, you take a rest, but you just this is a job and you're going forward every single day, work at it, dedicate yourself to it. And it worked. At the beginning, I was running 30 to 40 kilometers a day, taking rest days every 2-3 days. Every 5 days. And then by the time I got to Argentina, I ran the last 28 days, averaging 58 kilometers without taking a break. So like the body grew, I grew as what I was doing. So it's just about learning on the job, basically, and just being very pragmatic about it.
Wow. That's incredible that you were, keeping and setting your goals along the way. And it seems like that was keeping you motivated. Were you also keeping in touch with people from home, like your friends and family? Did you speak to them at all during this whole expedition that you embarked on?
Bizarrely, I managed to rekindle my relationship with my ex-girlfriend as I ran from Canada to Panama. I had to come home for my sister's wedding. So we chatted during that time, because one of the things in London, we never communicated because we were rushing around all the time. Suddenly I had all this time on my hands and we actually had proper conversations. We got back together, sadly not together anymore. But and I also, during the whole of the expedition, I actually spoke to my parents more than I've ever spoken to them, I think, in my life before. And it got to the point where you're like in the middle of a desert and your phone rings and you're like, Mum, I'm trying to do an adventure here. Can you leave me alone? It was amazing with technology, because everyone thinks that you go to like Nicaragua, there's going to be very bad reception, but they never had landlines. They went straight to mobile phones. So the infrastructure that was put in is actually pretty good. There was always people. And that's one of the things you do when you're doing these things alone. You get moments where you need to speak to someone, and there were always people there who you could turn to and say, look, I'm struggling, or, am I doing the right thing? Or just kind of looking for a bit of reassurance. And, having known that I was struggling a little bit with like mentally from having my job. And then when I got the support to go and do this, I knew that there was a support mechanism there. So if I needed it, I called upon it.
That's brilliant, though. I love the fact that that it helped you reconnect more with family. And in terms of mentality, I couldn't even imagine what you were going through, where you were going through different countries. I mean, I personally be worried about what happens if I get robbed? What happens if, something happens to me? Do these sort of things go through your mind at all?
I think they do at the beginning, because you're going into the unknown. And also at the beginning, you're filled with a whole bunch of, I don't want to say advice, but people's thoughts. So everyone's saying, you can't do this. This is not possible. You can't run across the Atacama Desert. You can't run across the Andes. Especially in America, like you will get murdered as soon as you get into Mexico, and the police will extort you and da 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 da. But the more you go into it, the more you realize that those things aren't true, and that you are stronger than you think. And when I got to Mexico, the police actually bought me lunch and they took selfies with me and they told me the safer routes to go. And I think in the 17,000 kilometers, I didn't have a single bad experience with a human being. And I had very simple rules in place, like don't run at night, don't get drunk or do drugs, and don't sleep with local women. And if I stuck to those kind of rules, it kind of worked.
I mean, that's great. And I think that it's a testament, because obviously when people are trying to start new things, or if they want to embark on their own new career, then you will get people that will say, oh no, you can't do this, or you can't do that. And then some people that will hold them back, and then they'll never actually pursue what it is that they want to do.
Yeah, well, one of the things I learned on that was, this is what I found, when someone comes up to you and says, you can't do this, it's because they don't think that they can do it. And therefore, because they don't think they can do it, they don't think you should be able to do it. So it's a kind of like their fear they're projecting onto you. So you just have to learn to speak to these people and ask why they don't think it's possible. They will either tell you something that you've already taken into consideration, or they'll highlight something that you need to then add to your list of things that you need to overcome. Sometimes when you're doing something really, really big, people will look at the whole journey and pick out something a long way down the line and identify that as a problem why you can't start because of that thing. So for me, running across the Andes at 4,800 meters, people were saying, that's not physically possible, you can't do it. And by the time I arrived at the Andes, I realized that what everyone was saying was absolutely true, because they were speaking to the Jamie who hadn't started. And that person completely 100% wouldn't have been able to. But I'd been running for 12 months and I'd spent every day thinking about this thing that was coming and how do I make myself stronger? How do I prepare for it? How do I put myself in the best position to be able to successfully overcome it? But when I arrived there, I think I was probably the best placed person in the world to actually take it on. And actually, I was getting a little bit bored of just running. By that point, I was running over the Atacama Desert and finding it easy. So it was a new challenge that was actually making the journey more exciting and interesting for me. So I think for anyone who's taking on anything big, and people say, look, you've got this and this and this, it's those challenges down the line that make it exciting. That's why you do it. And, take on your challenge regardless, just being cognizant that those things are things you're going to have to overcome.
That's really good advice. And I like the way that you put that. I was just looking at all your accomplishments, and some of them are just crazy. Like obviously the one that we've just been speaking about, Canada to Argentina, is just amazing. But also you've had solo and supported runs. You've traveled all across Australia. You've cycled from London to south of France. What is your favorite adventure so far?
So the thought process behind the adventures I do is, I pay for all my adventures. I do work out with my adventures to fund the adventures. So I have sponsors and all that kind of stuff, but I use the money they pay me to do the adventures. I then choose the adventures myself. So they're always my passion, I've identified something in every adventure I'm doing. And after kind of doing 3 big running adventures, I decided that I needed to diversify to learn new skills, which is why I got into cycle touring, mountaineering, wilderness hiking, and being able to say that I've cycled through the heart of Australia, I've climbed the highest mountain in the Southern Hemisphere, been to the closest to space you can get. These are all little things that drove me. And so choosing these different adventures, all these adventures, they're all chosen on a way. So basically my drive in life is to become the best version of myself as an adventurer as I can be, but making sure that I'm doing what I want to do. So every adventure I do has got a purpose, and none of them identify themselves as the best, because I went into each of them trying to grow myself as a person, and each adventure has added to that. So, trekking across Mongolia with camels was a complete and utter disaster in terms of an adventure and expedition. But I learned a lot, and the scenery was amazing. The people were fantastic. Running across Iceland didn't go according to plan. I was successful, but I've got to the point where I was 620 kilometers, did it in 12 days, and I was disappointed with how it went, because I think it should have been quicker. And that was down to mistakes I'd made in planning. I brought someone along who wasn't prepared for that, and that had a negative effect on the adventure. But every adventure is the best adventure, and the next adventure will be the best adventure. So
that's good. Would you ever want to revisit any of the adventures that you've done in the past? To, like you said, when you're disappointed in time, would you think to yourself, do you know what, I'm going to do that in the future, but I'm going to better the time in which I accomplished it? Or are you just going to accept what you've achieved and then move on to the next?
Well, one, I've got such a long list of things I already want to do. Going back's a little bit difficult. There is one there's the 3 Peaks Challenge, which I did when I got back from running the Americas. So I went up to Scotland, climbed Ben Nevis, ran to Scafell Pike, climbed that, and then ran to Snowdon and did the 700k solo and self-supported in 13 days, 23 hours or something. And unbeknownst to me, that set a record. It was a pretty easy record because it was the first time it had ever been done. But now every single time someone beats my record, they come and say, "Oh, I beat your record." And it's like, I didn't know it was going to be a record. I now want to go back and say, right, I'll just beat you all. But I'm not about firsts, and I'm not about records. So I think, to answer your question, I would say that I love the fact that I've diversified away into so many different sports that I can go back to the countries I love and experience it in a different way. So I'd love to go back to Bolivia, and rather cycle, I'd like to go and climb some mountains there. Go to Iceland and cycle around it rather than run across it.
That's brilliant. So out of all of the places that you visited, because I understand that obviously culture and seeing the world is also very important to you, do you have a favourite?
I kind of split the world into two kind of. There's the kind of rural world where things are less developed, and then there's the more civilized. I don't like that word, but the more developed countries. So like Australia was great fun and stuff, and Iceland was great fun, but the infrastructure is so in place that it takes away from the sense of adventure. So I love. I'd say it's more a type of place I love. So I loved Paraguay and Bolivia and Colombia and Mongolia. Those are the kind of places I want to go back and see more of.
So what's next for you? Are you in preparation for a new adventure? Because, I mean, if you're doing one right now and you've stopped to do a podcast with me, I'll be very honoured.
Yeah, no, so right now I'm in the middle of the North Pole. No, I do. It's very difficult. I'd love to say what my next adventure is, but I'm not able to at the moment, partly because of who I'm working with, but also because of the whole situation with COVID. We don't know what next year is going to look like. So I've been stuck in limbo, like a lot of people. But I have an adventure ready for March 2021. I just don't know how it's going to end up being. I don't know if it's going to be one continuous route somewhere amazing, or if I'm going to be going round in circles. As soon as I know what it is, I'll be able to talk about it. But what that has done is it's allowing me to move away from this state of kind of just suspension, not doing anything, to have something to focus on, have something to prepare for, plan, the motivation to get fit again. So that's kind of a really nice thing to have, especially when the nights are getting darker and it's colder, and having something positive to hold on to is a nice change.
I mean, how do you maintain fitness when you're in between adventures? Do you have a set routine regime?
So I kind of fully own up to the fact that when I finish a massive adventure, I come home and pretty much do nothing, eat and drink lots for a month or so. But then I do get back into my routine, and I have a kind of strict routine, which I've just done a vlog about actually on YouTube. So now I start every day with going for a walk. I like to do a 5 to 7 kilometer walk, and that's kind of for the mental side. Get myself ready for the day, put my to-do list into place, get the blood flowing, wake up properly before I sit down. I try to get back to my desk for 9, and then I'll work for 3 hours. At the moment, I'm writing a book, so I'll go and work on that for 3 hours, and then I'll do yoga to help with strength, like kind of flexibility and strengthening around the joints. Ankles are a weakness for mine, and just kind of that's injury prevention. And then in the afternoon, I'll do probably an hour of strengthening exercises, boxing and rowing and weight. And then I'll wrap it up with something like a run or a cycle to kind of thing. And I kind of aim to do between 1,000 and 1,500 calories a day if possible.
Well, that's really good. I mean, at least that you've got a really good routine, and it's something that I want to get more into in terms of yoga and stretching, because I could obviously do more with myself. But is there anything else that you'd recommend to, say, the listeners of this episode, if they haven't embarked on running or they want to get more into endurance sports, but they haven't started or they haven't taken the first step? What would you recommend as a kind of a starting point?
Oh, that's a difficult question because it's very dependent on the personality of the person. But a lot of people look at adventurers and sports people, and I can't speak for like professional athletes and stuff, but they all expect that we just get up and do this stuff every day. And I think it's good to know when you're starting out that even the people who do it every day find it hard some days to get out and do it. And the way that I overcome that is by putting this routine into place. So today I'm doing this podcast. I've had a few other things happening, but I still made myself do yoga, even though it was just half an hour, not over an hour, which I would normally do. I have to keep to that routine. So even if if I can't fit it in, I'll just walk around the block or something just so I can tick it off, and I'm staying true to myself. And that allows me to then feel like I am progressing along my plan. So yeah, just turning up is the only way you can do it.
Yeah. I think that's key. That's something that I wanted to find out from you, because obviously you see these incredibly successful people like yourself where they've accomplished so many great things. And I always want to know how it started for them, because, you know, all of us, we want to take that leap. You took the leap with your, you know, with your job and doing something that you wanted to do. And I'm always interested in where it all started for that person, because we always see the immediate success, but I want to strip that back and get to the root of where it began.
One of the things I find quite interesting, and even for me, is when I look at other adventurous people doing bigger stuff, and you think, God, that person's just got it all together. They're completely sorted. It's so easy for them. Look how amazing they are and happy they are and all that kind of stuff. And I think, you know, it's worth remembering that the people, like, getting into some of this stuff doesn't always come from a positive, happy place. Like, I got into adventuring because I think I had a lot of negative, or I don't like the word dark, but kind of, I wasn't happy with myself. I wasn't happy with, I had very hard on myself about how I do things. And I actually use adventure as a way of taking all these negative things and turning them into positive things. So I think the kind of inception of what I do came from a bad place. I'm turning it into a good place.
Mm. I mean, I can tell from what you're documenting as well that you have turned it into a positive. I love the fact that you've mentioned on one of the videos that you had like a Forrest Gump moment where I can't remember where you're running to, but then all these kids started following you, and then some started breaking away, and then others stuck with you to run to the next town. It's just like that sort of stuff to see is just, it's actually really nice, and it's really amazing. So Jamie, you mentioned that you're writing a book. When can we expect that from you?
I'd love to be able to give you a clear answer to that one, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who also want to know the answer. I started writing the book in 2016 and quickly realised that writing a book is a lot harder than running 17,000 kilometres. I have written 165,000 words. My book is meant to be 80,000 words. So I'm currently going through the process of editing it back to 80 to 90,000 words of clean prose. And I hope to have that process done in the next month or so. And then it'll be the final editing. So fingers crossed sometime in 2021.
Amazing. Is the book documenting your journey of getting into, well, becoming more of an endurance adventurer?
The book is an account of the 17,000 kilometers running through the Americas. I have thought up, I would like to write a book about the kind of development into how I am now and kind of moving into other sports, and how that's helped me on the mental side, and trying to give an honest background to being an adventurer. The kind of not quite so rosy parts, as well as the really high points. But I'm going to focus on getting this first book written.
I'm very excited for you, and I hope the editing goes well, and we can't wait to read it when it's due. But in the meantime, when I publish this episode, I will put links to your YouTube channel so that the listeners can actually view what you've been up to and see firsthand your adventures, which they will obviously see how incredibly inspiring it will be to watch you in action. So, Jamie, do you have any last thoughts for the listeners?
The only one I'd say is anyone who's out there looking at doing an adventure and is finding excuses not to do it, don't let those excuses stop you pursuing getting into adventuring, no matter how small it is. Those are just things you need to tick off. So a lot of people say, oh, I can't do adventuring because I've got a wife and kids and blah, blah, blah. There is always a way. Never give up. Adventuring will help you mentally and physically, health-wise. And I can't recommend it enough.
Amazing. No, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on this week's episode, and thank you for sharing your insights. It's been really great hearing what you've been up to, and can't wait to see the next adventures that you take on.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Jamie.